Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, 3 Microsoft Tools to Strengthen Your M365 Security and Governance Posture, featuring our special guest, Vlad Catrinescu. My name is Ivan, and I'm a sales manager here at Syskit. And today, we are joined by Vlad, our star of the day, and my colleague Bruno, who will be showing you a demo of Syskit Point later on. Many of you already know Syskit as a company, but for those who don't, let me briefly introduce you to us. Syskit is a software development company founded more than 13 years ago. We developed products for M365 governance and security, as well as for SharePoint on-premise administration. We currently have more than 3,000 customers around the world, ranging from small businesses to large corporations with hundreds of thousands of employees. We currently offer 4 products, including our award-winning SP-Docket for SharePoint on-prem administration, as well as Syskit Point for M365 governance that we'll be demonstrating later. Before we start, just a few housekeeping rules and items. All registrants will receive a recording of the webinar within a few days. After the presentation, we will have a short demo of Syskit Point for M365 governance and management platform, showing how it can help you assess and clean up your M365 secure data and empower IT teams to stay in control. After that, we'll have a Q&A session where Vlad will answer any questions you may have. And please use the Q&A function on the right side of the screen to ask your questions throughout the webinar. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our special guest. Vlad Catrinescu is an Office 365 consultant helping organizations get the most out of their Microsoft 365 digital workplace. IT professional at heart, Vlad focuses on helping administrators deploy, manage, automate, and configure governance across services such as SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft Teams. As an author, Microsoft certified trainer, and recognized international speaker, Vlad has helped over 1 million IT professionals and end users across the globe to better understand and get the most out of Office 365 and the greater Microsoft 365 platform. Vlad is the author of 3 SharePoint books published by Apres on over 60 courses on Pluralsight covering SharePoint, M365, and Power Platform. I will now give a warm welcome and turn things over to Vlad. Vlad, are you ready?
Hello, Ivan. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. How about you?
Good. Awesome. Let me share my screen here. Let me know, just double checking before I get too excited because then I talk too much. Can you see the right screen here?
Yes, we can. All good.
Okay, awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are in the world. And thank you so much for coming here today to talk, listen to this presentation on a topic I'm really passionate about, Microsoft 365 Security and Governance. As you can see a bit behind me, it's a bit of a mess. I actually moved last weekend, and you will not believe, we all have a cable box where we store, like, we all work in IT. We all have a cable box. I swear, I don't know why, I think I have like 10 of them. And now I was just looking for the cable to power up my lights, and I swear in all the cable boxes I find, I could not find the one cable I'm looking for. It's always like that. But again, back to our topic. Amazing introduction. Thank you very much. Today, we are going to talk about security and governance in Microsoft 365. And there are so many tools out there. When you talk about security and compliance in Microsoft 365, Microsoft gives you this super nice, easy to consume slide, right? Where you basically have about 100 tools there. We only have about 45 minutes, so I'll tell you right away, we won't get to all of them. However, we will get to 3 tools that I feel that are some of the most important tools out there, and some of them that are not used enough, that I think should get more usage inside organizations. And hopefully I'm going to show you something cool that you haven't seen before today. Before we continue, please use this 45 minutes to ask any questions that you might have. I mean, I'm here. You have me for until the top of the hour. If there's any questions, I'll try and stay a bit extra time to answer all of them. And I'll also try to answer some of them live. We have an amazing team on the backstage that will read your questions, queue them up for me. And I told them if there's any good questions that come up, I have a demo environment that I can break today. So don't hesitate to ask any questions. We might even do some of them live. But today, we will talk about 3 tools. If we have time, we'll talk about a 4th one, but we'll keep that as a bonus. We will talk about Azure AD conditional access. We will talk about Azure AD entitlement manager and privileged identity management. And I guess we'll have no choice but to talk a bit about licensing as well, because you cannot talk about security and governance, unfortunately, without talking about a bit of licensing as well. You need a separate PhD for that. I always joke around, but we'll cover everything. Before we talk about the tools, I wanted to take a quick minute to talk about Zero Trust. I'm sure that a lot of you have seen Zero Trust everywhere. As soon as you look at any Microsoft cybersecurity presentation, you see them talking about Zero Trust. You go on the web, any article you look at about cybersecurity inside organization, Zero Trust comes up. So I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk about the concept and how Microsoft pushes the concept. This way, after that, you can see how the tools that we will talk about today fit in that concept. So, what is Zero Trust? At its base, Zero Trust is a cybersecurity model with a very simple premise. Eliminate the concept of trust from your network. But what exactly does that mean? I mean, this is super easy, but where does it come from? What does it mean? To better understand, let's take a look at a traditional network design at a very high level. So how did we used to design networks in the past? I'll split this up. So what did we had? We had corporate resources. We have our internal network, we have the firewall, we have the internet, and we then have the DMZ where all of your client-facing, web-facing resources might be stored. The way that we have designed network security before was that everything that was inside your network perimeter, your corporate perimeter, was trusted. So as long as somebody was in your network, they were the good people. We trusted them. The internet is where all the bad people are. That is untrusted. We don't want to trust anything from the internet. And then the DMZ is where you would have a lot of different rules on who has access to what ports are open and things like that. But the big problem we had was that once something was internal, it was trusted. So from a security perspective, the problem that we had was that when somebody managed to get into your internal network, they were free to move laterally because we didn't have any checks in place. But especially in the past 4 years, since the pandemic, we've seen big changes, and this is something that's been happening for over a decade now, but it's been accelerated by the pandemic, is that the corporate perimeter has changed. It's the way we work has changed completely. We now have things such as cloud technology, which is, well, accessed via the internet, so from anywhere in the world. So we have good people coming in from the internet into our corporate resources as well. That's how people work. We also don't only work from our office desktop anymore. We have a mobile workforce. So people work from the internet using their tablet, using their phone. They're really everywhere. And let's be honest, the bad people, it's not like they went to sleep. All the bad actors and threats have also evolved. They're also stepping their game up and really evolving the way that they attack networks. So how do we uh, apply zero trust? Well, zero trust has three guiding principles. The first one is verify explicitly, which advises us to authenticate and authorize based on all the available data points. So in the past, whenever somebody was signing in, we had their username, we had their password. Okay, Vlad at company.com. Everybody knows my password is I love SharePoint. And then that login was good. Vlad is good to go. Vlad is authenticated. Perfect. But we can't really do that anymore, right? Of course, everybody knows about multi-factor authentication, but even with MFA, we should take all the available signals that we have. We have such a good amount of data that we can use today automatically. We can take, where is this user signing in from? What is their IP? What is the location that their device tells us they're in? Because if they're logged in on a VPN, the IP might appear from the US, but the user might be in Canada. What device are they signing in from? Is it an Android device? Is it an iPhone? Is it, I don't think many people are signing in from Windows Phone anymore, but is it a Windows Phone? What service are they trying to access? Are they trying to just access SharePoint, Azure? Even more specific, can we make rules that if they want to go on the intranet, which is a lot of the public news, it's okay, but if they want to access the SharePoint site where employee contracts are stored, then we apply different rules. And also, how can we detect anomalies? There are Microsoft Azure AD identity protection that we're not talking about today in detail because, again, we only have 45 minutes, is able to analyze over 6.5 trillion signals per day, which is a crazy number. But what we're able to do and what we should do today is create a user behavior baseline. Because me, that I travel a lot, so I'm in Canada today. In a month, I'll be in the US, and then 1 week later, I'll be in Dublin for a conference. I'm a person who travels a lot. If I ever log in from another country, it shouldn't necessarily raise a red flag on its own. But if you have somebody that for the past year, they've only worked 9 to 5, they logged in from the same 2 locations, from home and from the office, and then that person all of a sudden logs in at 11 p.m. from another country, that should raise a big red flag. So we're supposed to verify explicitly using all of the available signals that we have in that we can get. Our next guiding principle is least privileged access. In a zero trust model, we shouldn't have people that always have admin access, right? So the way that we gave admin permissions before, especially, is either that, hey, you are the SharePoint admin of our company, your main user has the SharePoint online admin role. Or if companies got really fancy, you had your main user, let's say Vlad at company.com, that was a normal user, and then you had a second account, ADM-Vlad at company.com, that actually had the admin role. So let's be honest, like if the hackers cannot figure out that you have ADM in front of all your admin accounts, but that's another topic. But even then, a big problem that we had was that ADM, your main account, always had the SharePoint Online admin permissions. It was an account that had standing privileges. how can we get to zero standing privilege that whenever you need to work on something that requires an admin, you go in a system, you request the admin permissions, you only get them for the amount of time that you need, and then you go back to being a normal user? How can we create different risk-based adaptive policies that adapt to the permissions that we have? And lastly is assume breach, which kind of frames the whole mindset that we assume that we go into implementing zero trust is. And you'll see a lot of security people are often very pessimistic and they don't trust anything by default. But how do we assume, how do we just assume that we've been breached, and we use analytics and network segmentation to say that even if we've been breached on one part of our network, how do we stop the hacker from moving laterally into other parts and getting access to more data? So those are the guiding principles of zero trust. Now let's take a look at how the three tools we have fit into the first two, because again, I wish I could spend the whole day with you all. I love talking about this, and the big problem will be trying to keep it in 45 minutes. But any questions you have about the last one, please put them in the Q&A. It'll be my pleasure to get to all your questions today. Okay, let's start talking about our first tool, Azure AD Conditional Access. So what is Azure AD Conditional Access? Azure AD Conditional Access is an additional layer of security between authentication and authorization. Quick recap, just in case they're not the same thing. Authentication is the act of verifying that Vlad is trying to sign in. Authentication confirms that Vlad is Vlad. Authorization then checks, okay, Vlad is trying to access this SharePoint site. Does Vlad have the permissions to access this SharePoint site or not? Conditional access sits between the two. Conditional access, we have policies inside. Those policies will evaluate every access attempt, and they will decide if we want to grant access to the user, if we want to block access to the user, or we might require some more conditions to be met, such as requiring multi-factor authentication to be performed, or maybe requiring that the device you're signing in from is marked as compliant. I already mentioned it before, but conditional access is implemented through policies created by each organization. They can be applied to users, to applications, so it's super flexible. And I promise one more slide, then we go into some demos to actually break some stuff. So how does it work? User signs in. So remember, user authenticates. If you have MFA turned on, the user will perform the multi-factor authentication, and the system will go in and gather all of the signals. Remember when we talked about verify explicitly, Azure AD Conditional Access will take a look at all of the signals, such as who is the user, where are they signing in from, what type of device are they signing in from, is it domain joined, is it compliant, what application are they trying to access. And if you have Azure AD Identity Protection, it can also check your sign-in risk and your user risk. So the sign-in risk is the probability that it's actually not you who signed in, and the user risk is the probability that your user has been compromised. So for example, an example of user compromise is if Microsoft, they have thousands of security people that actually look on the dark web for leaked credentials. And if they find a valid credential of an Office 365 user, and that user has Azure AD Identity Protection, it will create a big red flag for the admin, and they will mark that user as a high user compromise risk. But anyway, so Azure AD will, after authentication, will look at all of those signals and it will verify every access attempt. So every time you access a SharePoint site, every time you go to a new application, it will verify each one of them explicitly. So not only when you sign in, every time you access an application, and you have three possible outcomes. Allow the user, require something extra to be done, or block the user. And then again, if you're allowed or you do the extra security measure, you can access your apps and data. The big goal of conditional access is to balance productivity and security. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the Mission Impossible movies, or if not, Ocean's 11, where in order to get to the safe, you need to pass the face detection, the fingerprint, the eye scan, the way you walk, and everything. And in a perfect world, the security people in organizations would make us do all of those before accessing every SharePoint site. We would have the full list of security checks. But that would destroy the user productivity if we have to do it every single time. Conditional access allows us to add some intelligence to it and only do it when it matters most. So you'll have access to the slides and everything. So let me actually go and let's create our policy and then see it in action. Great. So I will go in the Entra Admin Center. Remember, Microsoft renamed all their identity suite to Microsoft Entra. We have the new Entra Admin Center at entra.microsoft.com, where we can manage Azure AD from. So I will go here under Protect and Secure, then I will go to Conditional Access. Great. So first of all, what I will do is I want to show you some of my locations. So here I can create a location per country, and I'll do a country location just to make it easy to show. I can actually create a location. So for example, I could create one called Canada and USA, and then I can say, what do you want to determine location by? Is it by IP address or is it by GPS coordinates, for example? And then I would get all of the, I would be able to select the country. So here, for example, I would select Canada and United States here. Let's click here on create. So I can create named locations. After that, I will go to my policy. And let me actually delete this one here just to make sure it was a test I did earlier today. Let me create a new policy here. So let's do block USA. I mean, I feel like in all of the demos, we block Canadians, we block Europeans. Let me block the USA for once. We don't want anybody logging in from the USA. And I feel like if I could see the Q&A on my left screen or the chat, I would have some funny comments in there. But anyway, feel free to have fun. I can't wait to read your comments and everything after. Okay, so I gave a name to my policy, and then it's going to say, okay, Vlad, what users do you want to assign this to? I can either go into include or exclude. So everybody except exclude, or I create the list of people to be included. I can do none, all users. And by the way, if you select all users or you select things that are actually big, you will have a warning. Don't lock yourself out. This policy will affect all your users. So make sure that you don't lock yourself out after, because you won't be able to get back here to modify it. But you know what? I will only apply it to one person. I will apply it to Vanessa. Let me find my Vanessa here at Carved Rock Fitness. So I will only apply it to one single user. Great. Then, okay, so we're applying this policy to Vanessa. Then what app does this policy apply to? I can have it to all cloud apps. Again, you see this policy, if I do all cloud apps, will also impact the Azure portal. So be careful when you apply it. But you know what I'll do is I'll apply it to Office 365 only. I could apply it to only SharePoint. I could apply it to only Yammer. I could even go as low as applying it to one specific SharePoint site if I want to. So you have an amazing flexibility on it. Okay, so this policy will apply if Vanessa logs into Office 365, and then we can add conditions. So I can have the user risk and sign-in risk if we have Azure AD identity protection. I can have, for example, the device platform. So I can say apply if the person logs in from Android, iOS, and Windows Phone as an example. So I can do that. But in my case, I will block it if they sign in from, I had one location called USA. So I want to block it if they sign in from USA. And then it will say, okay, Vlad, if Vanessa signs into Office 365 from the USA, what do you want to do? I can block access or I can grant access, but you know what? Require multi-factor authentication. Or, as you might know, text-based multi-factor authentication or voice-based are considered less secure. So I can say, you know what, require multi-factor authentication, but phishing resistant. So only, for example, the FIDO2 security key or a Microsoft Authenticator app. But you know what, for this, I'll just block access. Great. And then I will turn it on. Let's click on create. Perfect, it's created. Now let's actually test it. You know what? I'll close this browser here. Let me go to a login as a guest. And here I'm based in Canada. So if everything goes well here, I'll go sign in as Vanessa at curvedrockfitness.ca. I'll copy it for later. Let me put my password here, which of course is I love SharePoint 123. And then I'm logged in, everything works fine, that's expected. I'm from Canada. But now let me go to this virtual machine here, where if I go and say, where's my IP, I'll go on one site. If I go here, it will probably tell me that I am, and the screen is a bit small, I'm in Washington, Virginia, US. So here I'm in the Americas. Let me go and browse as guest now. I'll go to portal.office.com. I will attempt to sign in as Vanessa. Next, you see it lets me. I'm not authenticated yet. Remember, Azure AD conditional access sits between authentication and authorization. So I need to be authenticated first. And now I have an error. You cannot access this right now. Your sign-in was successful, but does not meet the criteria to access this resource. So I was able to sign in, but it tells me like, hey, you did good, but you just cannot access it from here. However, if I go to portal.azure.com, if you remember, I only blocked Office 365. So if I go to portal.azure.com, it should allow me. So this is where conditional access comes in. Allows me to create flexible policies that, depending on a bunch of criteria, I can verify every access attempt and decide if I want to allow a user to sign in or not. Okay, looking at the time, we're gonna go over to the next one. I don't need this VM anymore. Please don't forget to put your questions in the chat there. I will actually open Teams here. I will need it later. Perfect. And let's move over to the next one. The next tool I want to talk to you about is Azure AD Entitlement Manager. Entitlement Manager allows organizations to manage identity and access lifecycle at scale and allows you to implement automation to actually give permissions to people. And by the way, I promised you I'll talk about licensing. Azure AD Conditional Access is Azure AD P1. Entitlement Manager is Azure AD P2. So it's the fanciest of the fancy licenses. Okay, Entitlement Manager. So allows you to automate access lifecycle. You can have request workflows, access assignments, access reviews, and even automatic expiration. What problem is it built to solve? And then we'll go directly in the demo and show it live. Did it ever happen to you that you go working on a project, you get added to the team or to the group or to the SharePoint site, and then all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, the information is in this other system, but you had no actual idea that that system even existed. You didn't even know you needed to request access to that system before for working on this project. So you don't even know all of the accesses you need for a certain project, for a certain workload. And then each resource might have its different owners. So you're like, hey, I need this. You go to the Teams admin, then you need to work in another SharePoint site, and then you need to ask the SharePoint admin for permissions. And all of this creates a bit of a, I call it productivity destroyer, because instead of working on stuff, it takes you a week or two to actually only get the permissions for you to start working on stuff. So bad user productivity. How can Entitlement Manager help? And by the way, it was mentioned at the beginning, but you have access to more slides than that. I'm not going to go through all of them in the interest of time. You can read them before going to bed tonight if you want to. But let's go to Entitlement Manager management, which sits under Identity Governance. In Entitlement Management, we create access packages. So let me create an access package, and I will call this one Syskit project. So we're working with Syskit. We're working on an amazing project, and then we want to.
Can you hear me, Vlad? We have an easy question for you. So Eric asked, which license is required for this conditional access?
Oh, I think I did answer them, but let me actually go to Azure AD pricing here. I'll show it to you also where to get it here. I think this is the page I'm looking for. Of course not. Here should be. There we go. So there is this page. I'll put it maybe in the slides, but of course it doesn't bring me to the right spot. Conditional access is Azure AD P1. But there are some things that might require Azure AD P2. But you should be fine for the basics to do with P1. Let's see here. Let me try and find the actual documentation for you. There you go. So if we go here in the documentation, using this feature requires Azure AD Premium P1 licenses for conditional access, but for Entitlement Manager that we're talking about right now, you need P2, so the more expensive one. I always say that Microsoft is not a charity, so the cooler the feature, the bigger the license that you need.
Exactly. So I hope that answers Eric's question.
Yes, Eric, if you have any follow-up questions, things like that, please do not hesitate. Okay, so Syskit project, access package for everything needed to work on the super Syskit project here. And then I can even have multiple catalogs with multiple permissions. Like I can have an HR catalog where not even IT is creating them. I'm giving the HR people the rights to create their own access packages. So you can have multiple catalogs with multiple permissions. Great. Then, okay, in this access package, what do we want to give permissions to? I can add groups and teams. So let's add those two that I see here. I can add more if I want to here. So you see all of the groups and teams that I have in my tenant, I can select them here. And then I can say, okay, add the person to Project Alpha HR as a member and add them here to Project HR as an owner. I can also add them to SharePoint sites. So standalone SharePoint sites. You know what? Add the user to the Contoso brand SharePoint site as a visitor. And then I can also even add them to Azure AD applications. So if you have any custom Azure AD apps, you can add them here too. So let me add them, for example, to the Graph PowerShell here. And of course, I think right now we only have one access right in there. Great. So whenever somebody gets access to this access package, they'll get access to all of that right away. When we remove them from the access package, we're like, hey, Vlad doesn't work on the Syskit project anymore. They get removed right away from all of them. Great. So now who can request it? Is it only for people in my directory? Is it for external people outside my directory? Or is it only admins can manually add people in here? I'll do it for people in my directory. Then who can request it? Specific people and groups, all members excluding guests, because remember, guest users B2B are inside our directory, or all users including guests. I want to do it including guests as well. I can even have an approval or not. You know what? Let's do it with approval, and then I'll say, let's do a specific people. I'll say that Patrick is the person that approves for this one. The decision must be made in this many days. And I can also say, hey, if Patrick doesn't answer in 2 days, forward it to somebody else. So I can do that. I'll enable new request, and then I can even add questions. What is the best M365 governance vendor? If they don't answer Syskit, we just say no. We deny them. And I can say this is required. I can have it in short text, multiple choice, and long text. And for all of you from Europe or from Quebec or any other multinational organizations, you can have localized text in multiple languages. So answer format, we'll do short text for this one. Great. Then lifecycle. Do I want to automatically expire those accesses after a certain number of days or never? I can also enable access reviews. So I can say, you know what, every month, each user will say, do I still need access to this access package, or I'm not working on this project anymore? We don't want people to have access to a bunch of stuff they don't need. So it will email them every month in this case and say, hey, you know what? Do you still need access to this or not? Or I can just send it to Patrick again and say, hey, Patrick, you're the one that is actually allowing people in. Every month you have to validate that they still need to be there or not. Let me turn it off for now. Then I can have different rules here. I'll skip that part. I'll just click on create. Now this will take a few seconds here. If I go back to Entitlement Manager to Access Packages here, I can copy the link to it. Actually have to copy the link. Great. So you'll see here that look at the teams that Vanessa is in. Let's go to request access to the access package. And this usually is done pretty fast. Knock on wood, and I did sacrifice a SharePoint site collection for the demo gods this morning. So let's hope that it works. But anyway, as a user, I just copied it easily, but you can always go to myaccess.microsoft.com. It will bring you to all the available access packages. Right now, of course, we only have one, but you might have 15 of them with all of the different packages you're eligible to request. I can request it here. I can say, what is the best M365 governance vendor? Of course, is Syskit. Do I want to only request it for a specific period or not? And I need to work on this project. Request access, perfect. And then after that, it's being processed, it will go for approval. Now, if I go in as Patrick here, let me go to Patrick. It'll take a few seconds. If I go to my access to my approvals here, it will take a few seconds here. Let's wait for it, give it a bit of time. You know how it always takes a bit of time for, there we go. Thank you, demo guys. There I see Vanessa requested it. I can say on review, perfect, access to Syskit project. I can see what was the answer. Perfect is the good answer. So that is an approve for me. And now we will approve this. We'll say, yes, Vanessa is the best. And then click on submit. Now, what will happen? Of course, this might take anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes. We might need to go to the next one, and then you'll see that it's happening in the background, just in the interest of time. But what will happen is that Vanessa will get added to all of the resources mentioned in the entitlement package. There we go. Gotta love it when it just works perfect like that. I got added to the two teams here right away. So now I'm able to collaborate only by applying to one access package. I got access to multiple resources. So I really hope you found that cool. Okay, last one. And I knew I was gonna have trouble staying within my the time that I had. But our next
no worries, Vlad. You can take another 5. So.
Well, of course I can take another 5. You told me I have till 11:45, so I'll take all the minutes you give me, Ivan.
No, I think in addition to that, you can go a bit over.
Perfect. Be careful what you promise, because I'll take all the time you give me. But
no worries.
Okay, so privileged identity management, a tool that I love. We'll start by the basis is that an administrator role is more valuable to a hacker than a user role. I'm sure we can all agree on that. With privileged identity management, I can provide just-in-time privileged access to Azure AD roles and Azure resources. So how does it work? Again, let me first of all show you that here for Vanessa, I don't have the admin center. And if I go to admin.microsoft.com, if everything goes good, I should get hey, you don't have access to it. So Vanessa does not have any admin permissions right now. What I can do, I can go into identity governance here, and I'll go to privileged identity management. So here is kind of the admin interface. I will go to the Azure AD roles, and then I'll go find a role that I want. And of course, I'm only showcasing the feature. I'm going pretty fast right now, okay? So don't worry, you're not supposed to understand all of it in the next 5 minutes. I just want to show you how awesome it can be. I'll go to the team's admin, and I'll say, you know what? Vanessa is eligible to be a team's admin. Vanessa doesn't have the team admin active. Vanessa is only eligible to request it. And I can even say Vanessa is eligible to request it for the next 3 months, not always. But you know what? I will say, okay, Vanessa is always eligible. Then I can go in the role settings, and I can say, you know what? When somebody needs to be a Teams admin, they can only be a Teams admin for 2 hours, or they can be a Teams admin for 14 hours. Let's set it at 2. I can say that on activation, when Vanessa becomes, or when anybody, Vanessa in this case, but when anybody gets this role, they need to perform MFA right away. Or I can say that, hey, you know what, right now I don't have any policies of this type, but I can say, you know what, I can plug it in with conditional access and say, in order to actually get the Teams admin, you need to be on a compliant device or on a domain joined device. You cannot be a Teams admin from your tablet or from your home computer. I'll just do none for now. I can say require justification on activation and require ticket information. And you know what? I also want to add an approval. So let me add Patrick here as an approver. So you don't only have it right away, you actually need to have it approved. Okay, I'll just say allow permanent eligible assignment, allow permanent active assignment. I can say, you know what? Nobody can have an active assignment forever. They can only be a Teams admin active for 6 months. or something like that. Then I can also add notifications. One of the assume breach principles is that, hey, you know what? We assume that we've been breached. So I can say that every time somebody gets the team's admin, we will email it@carvedrockfitness.ca. This creates this really creates awareness in the organization, and maybe somebody can say like, hey, wait, why did Vanessa get team's admin? I know Vanessa is in vacation in Barcelona right now. That's not normal. Something is wrong. That goes a bit with the assumed breach mentality that we're supposed to know what happens in our network. Great. So we now see that Vanessa is eligible. We did our settings. Now let me go in as Vanessa, go to entra.microsoft.com. Again, remember, Vanessa should be a Teams admin, so should know how to get here. I'll go to Entitlement Manager, not to Entitlement, to Privileged Identity Manager, and I'll go to my roles. I see I'm eligible for one role, which is the Teams admin. I want to activate it. I can decide, do I want to activate it right now? Or you know what, it's getting late. I want to work on this ticket tomorrow, if I can put the time right, tomorrow at 8 a.m. So I can schedule it in the future. But right now, I'll just put it for live. I'll put the ticket system was in service. Now, ticket number 1234, I need to fix Vlad's problem. Again, there we go. And then click on activate. Now you see my request is pending approval. What happens then is if I go back to identity governance, I go to privileged identity manager, I go to approve requests, it will take a few seconds again, depending on the demagogues. I should have put Patrick. You know, in real life, the 1 minute you wait for this to show up doesn't really matter. But when I'm looking at the time, it feels like forever. But anyway, here it is. I can see, okay, Vanessa requested Teams admin. This is the requested time. Remember, we only have it for 2 hours. Go fix Vlad's problem. Click on confirm. And then what happens is that I'll go back one here. I look to my active assignments. You see right now it's activated and it will end. Right now it's 11:47. It will end at 1:47 p.m. So it will automatically take my admin rights away in 2 hours, because we said for the Teams admin, you can only get it for 2 hours. So now this might not work. There's always a delay. So this might not work, but I'm crossing. Okay, so let me try it. And if not, I'll let the Syskit team, I'll just try it to sign out and sign back in. You know, I just want this last one to work as well. Let's go to Vanessa at carvedrockfitness.ca. Enter our password. And if there's always a bit of a delay, but in order to show it to you, I can probably go to all users here. I can go to Vanessa. I can go to the assigned roles, and you see Teams admin is actually assigned. So it just takes some time until, and again, it takes like 5 minutes. But we don't have 5 minutes today, so I won't show it to you, but believe me, it works. So that's it for me. That's what I wanted to show you. Ivan, thank you so much for the extra time. I did take 4 minutes out of the 5 extra you gave me. So what I'll do now is, while you all put your questions in the chat, the Syskit team has some awesome stuff to show you on what you can do and automate without paying any extra Azure AD licenses. But I'll let them talk about that stuff, and please make sure to put your questions in the chat meanwhile.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, Vlad, as well. It was a great presentation with the extra time. So, and like you said, for the rest of you, we'll have a Q&A session later on, so just submit your questions. We'll answer them after the demo. But before that, let me turn things over to Syskit's solutions engineer, Bruno, for a quick demo on how Syskit Point can help you assess and clean up your M365 secure data and empower IT teams to stay in control and much more. Bruno, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you and for the introduction, and thank you, Vlad, for the great presentation. I will take a couple of minutes to talk about Syskit Point, our governance and security platform for M365 collaboration tools. Now, when it comes to securing data, there are a few key steps we need to be able to take in order to ensure that. The first one is to gain visibility into our inventory, and this of course means all of the sites and teams, but also different type of groups and users. We need to be able to take actions that will help quickly correct any mistakes that have accumulated over time. Finally, we need to think long-term and how to maintain a healthy environment. And this comes from automatically doing various periodic checks, but also from empowering users to accomplish those goals. For visibility, one of the most common challenges is to get all of the relevant information into one place and not spread out over different admin centers that usually require different admin roles and have similar but different interfaces. And Point will combine a lot of different sources into one place. And one of the easiest way to get a lot of info at one glance is to look at our dashboard screen. Now here, you can dive into each of these categories more closely, or you can focus on those red exclamation marks that are trying to draw your attention. Now, it's not that difficult to get a lot of info in one place, but you also need to be able to navigate it easily. So when we go to our site screen, I'll show you the three main ways you can scope your views here. So first, on the top, we have this horizontal navigation that's currently showing me what my sites are connected to. Next, we'll usually have this drop-down menu with some pre-created views. So let's say I want to just check out externally shared or inactive sites. And finally, I can add additional columns here, like sensitivity labels or custom metadata tags that will allow me then to create my own custom views and really pinpoint what I'm searching for. The same logic, but with different options, obviously, comes into play if I go to the teams and group style. Of course, naturally, I can see my teams and groups, but I can also easily filter them based on group type, like distribution or security groups, or some properties, let's say teams with private channels. This continues if we go to the user tile, where we want to be able to easily identify some sensitive user groups. So let's say external users, where we support both ad hoc guest accounts or standard guest users and even shared channel users. Similarly, we want to be able to see all of the admins in our environment and what roles do they have. So now that we know all of the objects in our environment, we also need to know how they interact with each other. So let's say I want to examine one user access across the entire tenant. Now, usually this will take a long time because you have to go over each and every group, each and every site, and then each and every file in that site to get a complete picture. But because Point does a continuous sync and stores that data, you will be able to get that report much more quickly in comparison. And what I get is a highly visual and structured report showing me all of Eva's access across all of the resources, which level of access it is, and how it was given. Now, let's quickly focus on this administration site where she has multiple ways of being given access. And if I expand, I can see that she's a member of different top-level groups giving her access, but that permissions can also differ on the document library level and even on the file level, where this one file has been shared directly with a sharing link. Now, if I were to do a group review only, first of all, I might have missed some of the groups giving her access, and I would have surely missed the file. Now, from this report, but really from all reports in Point, I can easily do some management actions and remove her access from one group or simply remove her access altogether. This type of report can be also run on groups, which may be especially interested in those large groups like everyone or everyone except external users, because maybe they're just providing too much visibility onto some sites. But that sharing link got me thinking, well, what else might be shared like that? So let's quickly go to our report center. Let's find sharing link reports. And I know marketing loves to share stuff all over the place. Let me just type that correctly. And I'll select their team. I want to look at all of the sharing link types, and I'll run the report. And sure enough, there are plenty of results here. And again, I can expand to see who this was shared with and which type of the sharing link was used. So maybe I just want to remove this anyone link, or I can again remove them altogether. If I'm not interested only in the sharing links, I can run a full permission matrix report to see all of the unique permissions down to the file level, and again, make changes as I see fit. But all of this was just one user and one site, and no way as an admin could I manage them all, nor am I sure if I made a mistake when I removed all of those sharing links from marketing. It would be a much better idea to involve site and team owners to review their own content. And I, as an admin, just want to set that in place and allow them the means to do it. Now, when it comes to including not just your admins, but end users as well, scalability questions can start popping up. And this is especially true in large environments, as those numbers can go sky high, not only in user count, but in the number of resources especially. And here we're proud to say that Point is successfully running in environments of close to 500,000 users, and that there is no limit on the number of sites, teams, and groups you can sync. To wrap up, this brings us to the end-to-end lifecycle management. And while I don't have enough time to demo that in Point, I will just bring up this slide and quickly give you an overview of what that entails. So we can simply divide this into three main sections: creation, active life, and then end of life. In the creation part, Team Point will allow you to create different templates for resources that end users can leverage to get new resources, even if group creation has been limited on the tenant level. Here, of course, we want to ensure a couple of things. First, that some rules are being followed. So things like privacy settings, sharing policy, naming conventions. But we also want to apply some policies from creation that will help us in the next phase. So let's say we'll apply an access review policy because we want to periodically check the resource. But we also want to ensure that there's someone to actually perform that review. So we'll add in the minimum number of owners policy. Perhaps on some private teams, we want to make it easier for end users to get access to them, so we'll expose them with the access request policy. Finally, there will come a time where resources will get retired. And again, this too can be automated, simply asking your users what they would like to do with their resource once it's become inactive, or simply after some period of time. Now, let's use access review as an example to drive up this last thought. As I'm sure much of you are aware, this also exists as a native Azure functionality, but it's not necessarily an either-or proposal between the two. While there are some overlaps, there are also some differences. So for instance, our access review is independent on any licensing requirements, and while both covers teams and groups, our also covers SharePoint and OneDrives. However, we don't cover application. In the access review process itself, we took some time to implement extra quality of life additions, such as allowing you for better visibility from top down to the file level, but also making sure that you can see not only the groups on your sites, but the full group membership on them as well. This also comes in terms of allowing for greater flexibility into assigning different access review policies to different type of resources. And this will become even more easier with our upcoming rules engine. Now, so like I said, this is not necessarily an either-or proposal. It's simply choosing the best options in your arsenal to achieve the best result. And this building upon and improving of what's already there is the general approach we aim to bring across the whole Point platform. Now, there is still much more to do in Point, but I think I really need to stop talking now. So I'll just invite you to explore this on your own with a free trial available on our website. And I'll bring it back to you, Ivan, for some Q&A.
Thank you, Bruno, for another excellent presentation, as well as kudos to both you and Vlad. It was really great, and I think our registrants enjoyed it. So now it's time for Q&A session like we promised it. Vlad, I guess people were a bit shy today, so we don't have that many questions. So can you tell me a bit, so what are the most common questions people ask you regarding conditional access and privileged identity management? I think everybody would be interested to hear that.
Okay, so not a lot of questions. It's okay. I mean, they can always reach me via LinkedIn after if needed, but it's okay. If you're too shy, people need coffee. Okay, so some of the common questions. Conditional access. First of all, can we apply it to certain SharePoint sites only, not to the whole application? The answer is yes. However, now that Microsoft announced a new license, in order to apply it to certain SharePoint sites, you do need the SharePoint the Syntax Advanced Management license in addition to Azure AD P1. So that's something that was free. Was Azure AD P1 only while in preview, but now that it's out of preview, it's in GA, well, you actually need the Syntax Advanced Management license as well. Entitlement management, from a license perspective here, P2. One of the big questions I get and recommendations is that make sure you have more than one catalog. So have a catalog for projects, for example, where you have the project manager that owns it. You don't want for every project you have to request to IT to go create the catalog, and each time you want to add something in it, go through IT. That defeats the whole purpose of creating that automation. So try to create multiple catalogs, have a projects catalog, have an HR systems catalog, offload the work and train the people there to create their own catalogs and how it works. Get IT more into an overwatch and focus on something else more productive rather than you just clicking things like I did in a few minutes. It's not worth it. For privileged identity management, you can do it with every single Azure AD role. I highly recommend there are some roles you will always have a break glass account, right? We always talk about having a global admin break glass account that is always active. As much as we want to follow the best practice and not have anybody with standing privileges, you will always have a break glass account that I recommend you have. But that account, make sure that the moment that account signs in, everybody from your IT team gets an email, the break glass account signed in. So this way, if that ever gets used, everybody knows. And if they don't know about it before, everybody panics. But at least they know. But try to have as many as your roles as possible, not be always on. Make people eligible. Go through an approval or not. That is up to you. But even if you don't use an approval, it will still get logged in the audit log. You can still send the email. So you don't need the approval for every role, because that sometimes, I mean, for a password reset, if you just want to give somebody the password reset role, you don't want to have an approval every time, because again, a user is logged out, they cannot be productive. You don't want to wait for an approval before somebody can reset their password. But for higher permission ones, especially maybe at the compliance level or maybe Teams admin, you have an approver, but for Teams communication engineer, you don't have an approval. All of it still gets logged in the unified audit log, and if you want to, you can add the email notifications with it. So try to find the balance. All the security and governance thing is about finding the balance that is right for your organization. And lastly, make sure to check Syskit tools. I've used almost all of their tools. I mean, I've used SP Docket for, I feel like, almost a decade now. And always loved it. Use Syskit Point at a couple of clients, and the stuff they do, rather than you writing your PowerShell scripts, it'll cost you less to buy the tool rather than the time you'll put to write your own scripts or custom tools to do what they do. So make sure you check them out. Unfortunately, I only gave Bruno like 5 minutes to do the demo, but they do have resources where you can see the full demo of what it does. So make sure you check it out.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Vlad, for that. Once again, for your kind words. So like you said, so for all of you here, you can ping Vlad directly if you have some questions after the webinar. You can reach out to us. It was a great presentation. So it was a pleasure having you with us here. And Vlad, any last words before we wrap this up?
Hey, make sure you use all the tools, especially if you already pay for them. Make sure you use all the tools that you currently have in your subscription. You're paying for them. So look at your licenses, look at what tools you have available, get the most out of them. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much for taking 1 hour out of your day to come listen to me on a topic I love. So I know we're all busy, so I really appreciate it.
Well, yeah, thank you, Vlad. Thank you, everyone. So if you have any questions for us, you have an email, sales@syskit.com. Reach out to us, ask any questions about Syskit Point or any of our other products. We'll be happy to talk to you. And it was a pleasure having you all here. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.